Good morning, afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to do this webinar today. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about. Just so you know a little bit about the job I have here at Vermont Family Network. I help families with kids with developmental disabilities of all ages with any type of questions they might have about developmental disabilities. Some of the most common questions we have are about guardianship or SSI, adult services. So if you have any of those types of questions, you can give us a call here at Vermont Family Network and ask for family support, and we can help you with that. So today we're going to be talking about advocacy, and our focus really is on helping parents learn some tips about advocacy and how to advocate at the systems level. So we're not talking about advocating at the school for your particular child, but more about making systems changes. And again, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So first of all, let's talk about what advocacy is. Well, advocacy is action that aims to change laws, policies, practices, and attitudes. And advocacy actions are usually directed at decision makers who hold the power to implement the change required. So sometimes, and as many of you probably, I don't know who's actually listening, I'm a parent of a child with autism, know a lot of different parents, and sometimes parents believe they're participating in advocacy because they might go to a support group or they'll be on a listserv and talk to other parents about issues that are really taking place. But advocacy really doesn't begin until you're reaching a decision maker, and often that decision maker is outside of our circle of knowledge. So what advocacy isn't, it's not a spectator sport. And sometimes I hear parents have concerns about whether or not they can make a difference. And see, these are some of the things we hear parents say. Sometimes parents can be really negative that no one really cares about our situation, everyone's out to get us, or the world's against us, and no one really cares. And that is definitely not true at all. I've heard people say that someone of authority is aware of the issue, so that should be good enough. Or the thought that really somebody else should be taking care of this and creating the change. And my favorite is, I don't have the time, I'm the parent of a son or daughter with special needs. So in case you didn't think parents could make a difference, these are, here are some parents that started the National Association for Down Syndrome that was started by parents in 1960. 1965, parents started the Autism Society of America. In 1949, the United Cerebral Palsy Association was started by parents. And if that's not enough, probably the biggest accomplishment of parents, in particular of kids with special needs, is special education. And we would not have special education and the rights that came with it had it not been for the parents that got organized and really pushed for our kids to have access at school. So parents together can make a really big difference. Incidentally, I think as far as civil rights movements, this is a very different, unique role, because in other civil rights movements you have the actual person that needs the individual help or is looking for that special right to do the advocacy. This is really a third-party advocacy, because for many of us, we have, our kids are either young, my daughter is 12 years old, or our kids might have cognitive issues and they might struggle effectively advocating for themselves. So it's really important, and it's in a different situation where you have someone besides the actual person doing all the advocacy. So a question for you is, are you game to start making some changes? The picture of the man on the left is a 100-year-old marathon runner named Fauja Singh. Or you can continue being a spectator, which I think most of us fall into that once in a while. Okay, so assuming you want to start running marathons, the first thing to ask yourself is, what really motivates you? And for most of us as parents, it's our children. In the picture are my two daughters, Katerina. That was from about 3 years ago. But I like this picture because I have the two girls together and the younger one helping the older one who has autism. So I'm motivated by, most parents are motivated by our kids. I'm motivated not only to help my daughter with autism, but also my other child, because of all the time it takes to help my older daughter. The better off she is, the more time I can spend on my younger one as well, so I think that's a big motivator. So when you start thinking about what are some of your issues and concerns, you need to think about an issue that's something that can be addressed or is fixable. So if you look at those first two statements and see what the differences are. The first one, I need more home support options for my adult son with Down syndrome. Some examples are A, B, C, and D. That's something you might talk to a decision maker about. Versus just telling someone, you know, parenting a child with special needs is just really hard. And that's a true statement, but what can really be done about the latter? I mean, you need to be more specific and think about an issue that can really be addressed. And then the next thing is to think about what you're advocating for. If you are I've been doing advocacy in Vermont for about 7 years, since we started our support group about 7 years ago. And we'd have lots of opportunities where we'd have different parents get together and start brainstorming what their concerns are. When we do that, though, everybody's all over the map, and it's hard to get anything done. So you really need to start focusing on what issue you want to take care of. If it's too broad and all over the map, you're not going to progress very much. And also good to think about what system change can be attainable. Is it something that's realistic? If it's something that's going to cost a lot of money during a time when they're doing budget cuts, that's going to be a lot tougher. And it's important to have a consistent message, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. So the next part I want to talk about a little bit is about finding partners in crime, finding some other parents to do the advocacy with you. And I've seen in Vermont, just in the last 7 years, different attempts to get legislation passed or changes at AHS or Department of Education. And sometimes what happens is you'll get one parent that tries to do it all herself, or one or two people. And that's a problem for a lot of different reasons, because it's really important and fair to other parents and other stakeholders to seek input from them, because what you're doing or attempting to do can really have an impact on them. That's the one side of it. And the other part is by bringing in other people, you'll be bringing their talents and connections that you don't have. If it's a statewide issue, it's really important to have statewide representation. And I've seen that happen often, especially in Chittenden County, where you'll have a larger group of parents, but the issue really is a statewide issue. And it's important to have voices from around the state, because it really is different depending on where you live. Another reason to get more people involved is that you have to also recognize you probably don't have all the answers, and it can be a good slice of humble pie to realize that you don't have all the information. It's important to get input from other people. So with any of this, you can call us at VFN, and we can help with ideas on how to connect with other parents. That's really important to do. So as far as the other parents, it doesn't have to just be parents. I will start using some examples of the bill we just worked on, which is the autism treatment bill, and some of what we had done with that. So some of your partners in crime won't be just parents. They'll be also other professionals as well. And the way we went about doing it is just really talking to different people and finding out who's interested in this, in helping, and taking inventory of the interests and talents and connections of team members. So within our group of people that were really interested in helping out, we had some who were better public speakers than others. We had some who were real technical. We had people who were organizers, and we had our networkers, and that was really important, and writers. So we have people of just different skills, and you won't find one person that has all that. And even if you did, that'd be way too much for one person to do. And so what's really important about other people that you work with is that they have a good attitude and that they are a team player and willing to do the work. Okay, and then it's important to also make sure you establish communication with advocates. And we did that through listserv and email, etc. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And also what we had done with, I think that's my next slide. Let me just hit that. Okay. So part of what I had done is with the autism bill, just to bring you back a little bit with that, that was really started from a couple of people on the Autism Task Force. It was Ron Marcellus and Lisa Irwin Davidson. They started working on this, I want to say, about 4 years ago. I got more involved about 2 years ago after the first Act 127 was passed, which provided for insurance coverage of treatment for kids up to age 6 with autism. And then I became involved, like I mentioned, about 2 years ago. And after getting more involved, actually as of last year, we tried to expand the bill to older kids. My daughter's 12, Ron's son is 12, and a couple other parents have older kids, so the earlier bill didn't really help us. So part of what I had done starting last year is I started to develop a grassroots list, and I'd have a notebook with me at all times, so whenever I'd meet someone who is either a parent or professional and works with people with autism, I'd ask them if they'd like to be on our list and if they'd want to help out. And inevitably they would say yes, and I'd toss them onto my grassroots list. Some people are willing to help more than others, and you will find that anytime you do some advocacy, you get a lot of people that want to help and make a difference, but then what happens is you tend to have more people that want to help more than others, and so from that we ended up with about what I call 3 different groups. So we had what we referred to as our inner core group, and that really was a group of about 6 of us that were really committed to the process and good team players. And these are the folks that if we needed someone to go to the State House, they would completely rearrange their schedules if they could, drop everything and run and do all that. And so those people, that was me, Ron Marcellus, who's a parent, Samuel Palmer, who's a parent and also an attorney at Vermont Legal Aid, Amy Cohen from Howard Center, Lisa Irwin Davidson, who's a speech pathologist from Newport, and then Judith Rossetti from Autism Speaks. So the 6 of us would meet frequently, we'd email frequently, we would share strategies, and that was really important. But these were the folks that were, as busy as they were always willing to take time for meetings and drop everything and run to the State House and do what was needed. The second group I think of as an outer core group. Those are sort of folks that kind of wanted to do more but really couldn't, or for one reason or another weren't really part of that whole inner strategy group, and that's for different reasons. But these folks are really important because they really cared a lot about the outcome. They really cared a lot, but that's just sort of, you know, the information they all received was more as a need-to-know basis, and it wasn't to leave anybody out. But when you start working with bigger groups, it's much harder to get things done. So that we sort of thought of as our outer core group. So when information needed to be distributed to people, we would go to them and they'd get the information out, or they would just work on specific issues. And some of the people from that group were really particularly great at reaching out to legislators. I think that was via phone or meeting and all that, so I think they were a really important group. The third group I think of as sort of the broader group, and those are the people I kept on the grassroots list, and initially I had maybe 50 people on that, and I added people to that list without their permission because they're people that I knew, and I knew they wouldn't get mad at me. But as I went with my little notebook, and I'd ask people if I can add them to it, and I did. And I'll talk a little bit more about the grassroots list in a minute. Oh, I guess we're skipping to this. Okay, so another decision to think about is, I think the slide got a little bit out of place, but that's okay, is who the key decision makers are that can address the particular issue. So is it a legislative issue? Is it a law that needs to be changed or new law that needs to be created? Is it an Agency of Human Services issue? Is it a Department of Education issue, or is it a local or school issue? Those are one of the things you have to first think about, is who the decision maker is going to be in your particular case. Okay. And it's important to know also who your possible allies are. And there's the good and the bad and the sometimes better. Sometimes I hear parents say, well, we need to get a lot of people to join, a lot of people to help, or can all these organizations come and help us? And that's sort of the initial reaction, is that you have an army of people, you can get a lot more done. And I don't think that's really true. But the good of getting extra people on board and an organization, perhaps a nonprofit organization on board, is that you can get extra help, you can get more energy, and you might get an organization with some financial backing. With what we did with the autism treatment bill, we had a budget of nothing, basically, and which meant, one of our really active advocates is Ron Marcellus, and he lives in Bennington County, and he would shoot up and down the state I don't know how many times on his own dime, paying for gas, taking time off of work. So it can really take a toll when you don't have financial backing at all, or as professional lobbyists would do, they get paid for their time. The bad side sometimes is that if you get others involved, or particularly another group of people, is that your initial message can really get diluted. And also, it might take on a whole different life than what is intended. Now you have different people, different leadership, different agendas, and it's a little bit harder to sort of keep under, I don't want to say control, but keep under the focus and the consistent message that's really important. So sometimes what's better is and this is an issue that we sort of came up against, and for the last 7 years, as I mentioned, in different advocacy efforts we've done in Vermont for autism, we've never really had issues with different disability groups or anything like that interfering or getting in the way at all, and that's a mean thing to say, but we did this time. We did have a little opposition from different disability groups, some concerns about it, and it got a little sticky for a while, because rather than talk to us directly, there was people going to the legislators, say they don't like this bill, it should be for everybody, it should be this, should be that. And it would have been hard to go get all those people to come back and support what we were doing. So our next best was to just have people give us a little bit of leeway and just be neutral without direct involvement. And like I put down, room for a clear landing from other interested parties. So sometimes it's not so much important to get everybody on your side, but other times it's important just to get people to not so much stand in the way of what you need to get done. And as I like to think, the fewer dogs in the fight, the better. So it's really important to know arguments against your issue and know who will be working against you. And it's not always obvious in our situation, as I mentioned. Having some opposition from different disability groups was no way anticipated at all. But we did anticipate, of course, to have opposition from the insurance companies and their lobbyists, because we know they do this in every state. They fight against the autism treatment bills there. But whatever your issue is, there's going to be someone who's either against you. It could be well-paid lobbyists, like in our case, or it could be just different reasons. And some of the different reasons might be competing interests. Like I mentioned, the insurance companies, will never get them on board, but there are different ways to deal with that. And what we received from different disability groups is some of the opposition came because they really didn't know as much information about what we were trying to accomplish. And so there was some incomplete and inaccurate information. So then it was a matter of educating people that they really don't have anything to be concerned about. What we're doing won't hurt anyone, but it can really benefit our kids, and it was really important to us. Often we come across budget constraints or concerns about your particular issue costing too much, and that could be an issue. It could be a philosophical opposition to it. So one of the things we heard from the self-advocates is that they're really against the idea of treatment. Well, that's okay. In our view, that was okay if you're able to articulate that on your own. You probably don't need treatment, but my daughter in particular has a lot of issues with communication, so treatment, speech therapy, and all that could be very helpful for her. So sometimes we come across that. Another issue is tradition, and for example, right now in Vermont, there's some parents that are getting organized about having more options for home supports for their adults with developmental disabilities. And part of the resistance with that is a tradition in Vermont to not have more than 2 people with disabilities living together, and that has to do with our reaction to institutions and all that. So that's a different type of resistance, and those are, most of all of these are a matter of talking with people and all that. So the other important issue is to know if the administration is opposed, and I don't know if Jason can get to this, but you kind of get the feeling at the State House that at any given time they know where the administration stands on an issue, and even though the governor might not be right there or you might not hear directly from him, you kind of have a sense that the senators and representatives know that no matter how much they feel for this issue, they know where the administration stands on it as well. So you really need to see where the administration is on this issue. A collaborative approach is also really important, because one thing that we as parents know if we have a child on an IEP is that it's a very different type of advocacy, even though if it's just for the one child, than if someone were to run over your dog or something and you're taking them to court. So the difference with this is that you have an ongoing relationship. So with a school with your child, you can disagree and have a good a respectful process for disagreeing, but overall it should be a collaborative approach, because you don't want to burn bridges, and that is the same at the State House. It's the same at Department of Education or at AHS. This is not my first time at the State House for sure. I've been there before on different issues, and I'll be back again, and it's just important to develop good relationships and have a good collaborative approach. And it's important not to take it personally if someone doesn't agree with you. And I find sometimes parents can be really defensive about someone not getting it, and they don't get it because it's not their world, and it's no one's fault, but we have a very unique world that we live in, and for that reason there's a really good connection with other parents of kids with special needs. It doesn't matter what that special need is. I could meet someone in a whole different state with a whole different background, and my gosh, they're a parent of a child with autism. I have the world in common with them all of a sudden. But other people don't have that background, and they just don't know, and it's okay. So we can try to give them information and help them understand, but it does take time for people to to get that. It's important to be polite, but be persistent about your message. I think it was Secretary Racine when he testified for our bill at Senate Health, and I can't remember for sure what he said, but I think he said that one thing was really effective is that we gave gentle persistence. So we kept talking about it, but we were nice about it as we went. So some other tips for legislative advocacy in particular is to pick a strong lead sponsor. That was very helpful, and Jason Lorber was a really exciting pick for us when we were trying to decide who would lead on the House side. There was a lot of excitement. He's got a fire in his belly, and he's very smart and fearless, and that was really important to get that. And we also had Anthony Polina for the same reasons. And it's important, especially if you're doing some grassroots advocacy like us, where we don't have any money, we don't have paid lobbyists. It's important to have someone on the inside that can do a lot of the advocacy, because you just can't be there all the time. And the legislators have friends that are legislators. They listen to each other, and it was really important. So I would say that was probably one of our luckiest opportunities. And, think twice about picking someone that has, and one of the or think twice about picking a sponsor who has a lot of other issues going on, because they probably won't have a lot of time to focus on yours. Try to do face-to-face meetings. One of our really great advocates is Ann Barbano, and she wins the prize for getting a lot of sponsors for us and finding Jason for us, and she would do that over cups of coffee. She would call legislators, meet with them, tell them her story, and it was really, really effective, and she just swears by how important those face-to-face meetings are. One thing that we did with our advocates is we established a calendar for the State House visits, and I created a calendar, and we try to get everyone there once a week, and it was really hard. We're all busy, and we all had to give up time from our jobs to go, but and that, to be honest, that's what really sort of settled that who was on that inner core list and who wasn't. Those are the folks that were really willing to give up time to get to the State House. So we try to have someone there once a week. There is nothing like being in the hall at the State House, sitting at the cafeteria, grabbing Jason as he walks by or grabbing a legislator as they walk by versus doing anything from behind a computer. There's no comparison on that. The grassroots list, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. So I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I have different sorted out by county and then by legislator. So for each county, I'd have all the legislators in that county, and by Jason's name, I'd have some of the advocates that corresponded to him, and if they wouldn't need to call him because he was already on board. But sometimes there are certain legislators you really have to reach, and I'd go down my list and I'd call those people and I'd say, I need you to call that legislator, and can we meet for coffee at the State House or something? And we would do that, and that was very helpful. And also the grassroots list, it was very easy to use that to communicate with other advocates. So we would do updates with, I think of my stakeholders, so other parents who weren't really super involved with doing this but wanted to hear about what's going on. So I would maybe a couple times a month, or if something big came up, I would do an email blurb, but not to bombard people because I really hate when that happens. And also I use that list to involve other stakeholders as needed. So when we were trying to get more sponsors, I think we ended up with 21 sponsors, which we were really happy with. And also if we needed to make phone calls to legislators and all that, that's what we use that list for. So that was really helpful. Another point is to find other ways or other people to help get your message across. So all of us from our inner core group and even the outer core, which is like another 3 or 4 people, had different ways of sharing why this was important to us. I tend to focus on, what's win-win for everybody. Others might focus on the family story. Others might focus on the technical issues. And sometimes you might come across where you're trying to share this with a particular legislator, but you're probably not really the best person to address them. One in particular was very focused on dollars. It wasn't so much about the story, but if you can convince her on the dollars, you'd have a very good chance. So for that, we scheduled a meeting with Judith Orsitti, who works at Autism Speaks, but happens to be a CPA. So the 3 of us could sit down and talk about the dollars and see, and that really helped that really important legislator understand how helpful this could really be. Just some final tips is to earn their decision makers' respect by being knowledgeable about the issue. This really isn't any different than when you're the parent at the IEP meeting, is by learning as much as you can about your child's disability, you can help educate the rest of the team about that. The 6 people in our core group learned the subject so well we could answer any questions, any concerns. We were really good about that, so I think they learned to be trust. And then I kind of learned the value of where lobbyists might fall at the State House as well, even though they're paid lobbyists, as they learn their issues and they can give a quick soundbite to the legislators as they walk by, and they need that because the legislators are dealing with so many different bills and issues. Understand that change takes time. This, for us, wasn't anything overnight, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures in a second. Know that there may be compromises. For our particular bill, we wanted to go without a lifespan. Some other states have autism treatment with no age cap. We settled for 21. We thought that was a huge improvement from age 6. We were happy with it. And just as we expect other people to be open-minded, you need to be open-minded as well and know that there are different ways to achieve your goal. And I wanted to close this up before I show you a couple pictures, is that at the beginning I mentioned that sometimes we as parents think that everyone's against us and nobody really wants to help or care. It's important to believe that others who are not part of your world can really care and fight for you. A really turning point for us during this session was when we knew that Secretary Racine and others from the Christine Oliver and Suzanne Santarcangelo were going to come and testify at Senate Health in favor of legislation that would help us. And we knew that would make a huge difference in trying to get our bill passed. And at that time, that was so emotional for me in particular. It's just like when there's a big issue at school with your child's IEP, and you get really emotional, you have to have someone come in. So what I did with the other advocates, I said, I'm not making any sense right now. I need to check out. This is way too emotional. And I had to step out, and it was wonderful to see those people that were not really part of our day-to-day world. And I'm talking about Amy Cohen from Howard Center and Judith Ursitti and from Autism Speaks. She's a parent, but not in Vermont. Lisa Irwin Davidson, who's a speech-language pathologist, and Sam Abel Palmer from Disability Law Project. And they stepped in and they took care of everything. I've never really felt so loved in my life, that all these other people were just taking all this time and really trying to work issues out just, you know, for the benefit of someone else's child. It was really amazing. So most importantly, just want to share is don't ever quit. This picture here was taken in May 2007. That's one thing that happens is that one constant in the IEP meetings I've always said is me and my daughter. We're the people that are always going to be there year after year. Everyone else changes. In this picture we have Governor Douglas, and that's my daughter on the left, Katerina. She was 7, and my younger one, Jenna Lily. She must have been 5. And a little blonde boy on the right is Josh Bartold, and Skylar Levy, Tristan Timponi on the left. And this was, 5 years ago, and the autism plan was a result of a lot of parents complaining that they need a lot of issues to be fixed, and that's where they came. So that was 5 years ago, and one of the issues was that we needed treatment for our kids. And this was just a couple weeks ago, and this time on the right we have my daughter again with the same pose, which I find is really interesting. Here she's 12, and my little one is 10, and that's me above. And then Josh has his little head, his head turned behind you. We have a different governor now, but the families, we're still 5 years from now, who knows when, it will be a different picture here, but just important to just not give up and just to keep plugging away. So here's my contact information, and you know how to reach me. I'm going to introduce our next presenter, and that's Jason Lorber. And first of all, I wanted to tell him that someday I will open for him, and he never I didn't get to say any jokes, but maybe this would count. I don't know. But he's been great to work with at the State House, and we're really happy that he could come and do this today. So his piece, we decided to put together a lot of different questions that we got from staff members on questions that would be really helpful for families. So he's going to be following a little bit of a different process with FAQs. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Claudia. That was a great run through, and Claudia knows what she's talking about. Getting this legislation passed was pretty much a long shot from the beginning, and because we had all our ducks in a row, we were able to get it passed. And big hats off to Ann Barbano and other parents who were activists who really made sure that this happened. This was a team effort, and big kudos go to Senator Anthony Polina, who did a lot of the heavy lifting on the legislative side. I was more than happy to help out on the House side, along with several of my House colleagues, and of course the administration, Doug Racine, and others there who helped us make this happen. It's such a team effort, and that's important when you're thinking about getting legislation passed, that it's great for you to participate, but if you want to really have an impact on the system, it's getting others involved. And people say that power is the ability to get others to do what you want them to do. That's what this is about, is how do you affect power? How do you get people on board? And how do we all share the same vision? So, and my background is in consulting, is in comedy. I still do perform stand-up comedy, and I joke to people that I ran for office because I wanted to spend less time with my family. And as a result, I I know that the legislature is a family, and that I'm always looking for family activities. So I welcome these legislative initiatives and these policies. I knew nothing about autism before I sat down with Ann Barbeno, and I did so because she asked me. Simple as that. And as soon it took maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes for me to get why this was important and why we need to take care of all Vermonters and not to discriminate against people based on what sort of condition they have. And with me on board, I said, I'm happy to help, and let's go for it. And we did. So in preparation for this webinar, Claudia sent me some FAQs that I believe came from you guys who had written in beforehand saying, these are some questions. I'm happy to field questions from folks. I see a couple of people have already made some comments, but they weren't real questions. But if you have some, send them along. But let me give you this overview of how laws are made, and I'll give you my perspective as a legislator, and know that there's only 150 members in the House of Representatives. I'm being facetious. That's actually a huge number. Vermont is one of the most democratic legislatures in the nation, well, both big D and little d, in the sense that we represent anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 people. So we're pretty close to the people on this. In the Senate, there's 30 senators representing 600,000 or 620,000 Vermonters, and that's still very representative when you compare it to other states and countries. So my perspective as a legislator is going to be different than other folks, but there's three basic things that we do. We vote on bills, we write bills, and we have lunch. And having lunch is probably the most important. But let me step back. So writing bills, we vote on bills. So most people, when they think about what legislators do, they think about, okay, you're sitting on the floor, maybe you've been really bored one day and turned on C-SPAN and saw a bunch of legislators and they're voting. So that's the final stage. When we're on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate, someone has brought forward a bill and we're voting on it. And that's a time where we can have amendments, which are small changes to the bills. That's one piece. The other piece leading up to that is our committee meetings. And in our committee meetings, that's where we're writing the bills. We serve in the House. Most of our committee meetings have anywhere from 8 to 11 people on each committee, and we're all state representatives. And we hear testimony. People come in and they tell us why they think a certain bill is a good idea or a bad idea. Or maybe they just come in and say, I just want to tell you about a problem. I don't even have a bill. That tends to happen at the beginning of the year until we have enough bills, and then we start working on the bills directly. And then, so let's say we're debating a bill, and then people will testify and say, well, this one section of the bill is really bad, you need to change it. And then the next speaker will say, oh, no, actually it was really good, and that's why you should keep it. And then we have to figure that out amongst ourselves. And surprisingly enough, most of the legislation that we pass, and a big chunk of the meaningful legislation that we pass, is nonpartisan. It's just we're doing the job of government. We're hashing out what are fair rules, what are good policies to have in place so we can avoid disputes, so that we can set the stage for businesses to flourish, so that we can protect folks. This isn't a real partisan issue. And then once we pass a bill out of our committee, it may then go to other committees, and then eventually it goes to the floor of the House where we vote on it. But the third piece I said was having lunch. And it also includes dinner and cocktails and maybe a poker game or two. And that's where we all talk amongst ourselves, and where we get ideas for bills, and where we suss out how people are feeling about things. And as Claudia mentioned, this is, when we're in the State House cafeteria, we're pretty approachable, which is another word for lonely, I guess. But we like it when people come up, especially if you're our constituent. If you're voting for me, you are my boss. And I'd like to say that most all legislators share that belief. Some are kind of over you, but most of us take you very seriously, and we really earnestly want to provide excellent service, and we want to do what's right. And we don't know all the ills of society. We don't know all the problems out there. That's your role, is to educate us and let us know what problems you're seeing, what solutions you're seeing, what opportunities. And so literally if I'm in the cafeteria and I see Claudia, that's great, because if I'm working on her bill, I know I can go up to her and say, "Oh, Claudia, I have this one question." I didn't have to set up a meeting. We didn't have to arrange our schedules. And as a legislator, I don't have my schedule. My schedule is dictated to me by the chair of my committee, who says, these are the 7 bills we're going to be talking about in this order, and guess what, Jason, I may change the order on you. So it makes it very difficult for me to duck out of a meeting and meet with someone at a specific time. But if I know Claudia's going to be in the cafeteria at some point during the day, okay, I can make it out there for 5 or 10 minutes. And usually that's all we need. Excuse me. If we need longer, then we'll just deal with that. So those are the 3 basic elements of how laws are made. Now let's say you have a specific idea of a specific issue of a bill or an idea. How and when do you approach us? Should you wait until the beginning of the session in January? Okay, there's no magic time to, I'll take the last part first. There's no magic time to contact us. I would say, though, that if you can get our attention outside of the legislative session, that is the best, because then we have more time to meet with you. And actually, when I met with Ann Barbano, it was in the fall. So it was before the legislative session got going. I had time to really talk with her, to tell her, well, if you want me to move forward on a bill, this is what I need. And so there was a lot of time to strategize. And I even helped her put together some of the different teams. I think she may have had Anthony already on board, but we were What's that? Oh, okay. So it was Claudia's senator, and they got him on board. But he made sense for a lot of reasons. He's very passionate about these sorts of issues, and especially about health care, and myself as well. And how you approach your legislator, this is kind of bizarre. Just pick up the phone and call them, or find out where they're going to be and just meet them and just say hi. Most of us are pretty darn approachable. And if you say, hey, can we go out to lunch? We'll probably say yeah. Or we might say, oh, I'm really busy, but let's talk now on the phone. And sometimes we'll take 10 minutes, sometimes we'll take an hour. And if you have a legislator who won't meet with you for lunch or won't talk with you on the phone, fire them. Get a new one. And you should be running against them next time. But it's pretty unusual for a legislator in Vermont to say no. And I would even venture a guess that if you wanted to meet with Congressman Welsh or Senator Leahy or Senator Sanders, and you said, seriously, I want to sit down and talk with them, you may not get to talk with them, but you will get to talk with someone on their staff. In Vermont, the legislature, we don't have staff, so it's us. So you get us. Someone just wrote in a question, what's the hardest thing about working in the legislature? Thanks, Jan, for that question. Well, that we don't have any staff, that doesn't help. The hardest thing is really knowing where to focus, because when we're in the legislature, we don't really have a boss. I mean, sure, you're our boss, the voters are our boss, but I can't take direction from 8,000 people, at least not very well. And they're not really my boss. I mean, I'm accountable to them. And then in the legislature, you know, like I could say, well, the Speaker of the House is my boss. Well, I also elect him, so he needs my support as much as I need his. And the chair of my committee is my boss. But guess what? If I duck out of committee, there's really not a lot of punishment for that, especially because why am I ducking out of committee? Chances are it's to meet with a constituent, or it's to work on some legislation. And so I have a lot of leeway of knowing how I can focus my time. So how important is bill sponsorship? So when a bill is created, one of the legislators has to come up with the idea, and they have to work with the lawyers in the legislature. They're called legal counsel, and they physically draft or write the bill, and they put our ideas into legalese. And if we say something as simple as, oh, I just want more money going to pay for autism care, and they'll say, well, okay, which money? Which buckets of money? Do you want the transportation money? Well, no. Do you want the health care dollars? Yeah. Okay, do you want the discretionary health care dollars, or the ones that are coming from the federal government? And it gets a lot complex quickly. So we really rely on our legal counsel to help us figure out the ins and outs. Now, who the sponsors are makes a big difference, in the sense that if you have a cause, you want to have a legislator who is really going to work hard for you. And so that's important to have, you know, who are the entrepreneurs, who are going to be the key people. You might want someone who's the committee chair. If you know it's a transportation committee, you want the chair of the transportation department committee. At the same time, for a bill like this, you know, we even, and when I met with Ann Barbano, I said, listen, you should, if you can get Mike Fisher, who's the chair of the House Healthcare Committee, get him as a sponsor. But but he said, well, he tends not to want to write bills that are coming to his committee, because he wants to have an open mind about them. And so some legislators will balk at that. I usually don't. I've been serving for 8 years in the legislature. How many people you get on as sponsors, it's helpful. It doesn't hurt to have a lot of people, but I don't find that to be a big determinant. But if you can get some early support of your bill, that's cool, and then you can also use those people and leverage it. So there's different strategies of how you want to do that. We have another question coming in. Okay. So what's my connection to federal reps? Not a lot. Do you have a connection with them, and do you ever meet with them with citizens? No. I mean, I certainly know Leahy, Sanders, and Welsh, and think highly of each of them. They're all three amazing men. And we don't intersect a lot on what we're doing and what they're doing, but you know, we'll sometimes, I'll usually see them at a Democratic Party event or a fundraiser or a Labor Day rally or what have you. And sometimes I'll be trying to work on getting federal legislation to support something that we're doing. It's rare. Sometimes we'll try to get funding. That will be much more likely scenario, at least for me personally, and other legislators may have more occasion to do that. But there isn't a lot of interplay with that. Okay, so now you got a bill, and you want to introduce at the State House. First of all, congratulations, because that's a big step. Then, okay, should you check in with the lead sponsor in May when we adjourn to see how it went? I love this question. No, you need to be there. If you're checking in on May, the answer is, what bill? I am working at any given time on 15, 20 bills. And so Claudia said, well, you should try to pick someone to be your sponsor who's not too busy with other stuff. And I disagree. I think, the busier person gets a lot more done. But, there's some legislators who what they will do is they will go to their committee. They'll see what bills are up for them, and they will sit, listen to testimony, correct commas, and say, oh, this punctuation's wrong, and this idea is wrong, and oh, let's work on this, and then they'll go home. And that's it. They don't bring ideas to the table, or if they do, that they don't really follow them up, or a lot of them also don't understand the legislative process. But there's a good chunk of us who do and can really work the system, and that's exciting. But you need to be a part of that as much as you can. Another question that just came in is do we have background in budgeting? It must be challenging to work with the budget process. If not, if an overview of the process provided for those who are less familiar with budgets. I actually am familiar with budgeting. I have an MBA from Stanford. I ran my own consulting business, and I do a lot of that stuff. So that has come in handy for me. A lot of people will tell you, even very well-respected people who are chairs of committees will say, I don't do numbers. And that's important for certain bills, and for other bills it's less important. It's understanding values and laws and people and systems and unintended consequences. There's a lot of different skills that you need to be an effective legislator. We're running out of time. So you have so how come something's not happening over time? Don't legislators get it? Well, yeah, we get it. Oftentimes we may not just agree with you, or it's more complex. Maybe an idea that there's a joke that everyone says, oh, here's my bill. It's really quite simple, and everyone laughs at that, because whenever you want to make any small change, there's always unintended consequences. There's always, oh, there's a reason we didn't do that, or oh, well, if you want to, like one of my bills I did when I was a freshman was I wanted to fund, I said, let's just fund a halfway house for women who are in prison, who want to get out, they need help getting sober, they need help learning job skills, that sort of thing. It's a really simple thing. And it wasn't a really simple thing. This was something that had been debated for years and years and years, and we actually did get it done. But it was done because then one of our unintended opponents was a homeless shelter. People who said, well, you shouldn't be giving money to inmates, you should be giving money to homeless shelters, and if there's money, then we want it. And it was really complex. So so I'd say just you got to be patient. If you don't have a lobbyist, wow, that's going to make it tough. I mean, I view the team that was put together with Claudia and the others as that was a lobbyist. They formed their own lobbying firm on their own. They did an outstanding job. I mean, the fact that I wasn't even aware that it makes sense now. She says, we were there every single day. We always had somebody there. Every week. So not every single day. That is so important. For me, a legislator who I'm working on, here are some of my issues this year. This year, I was working on justice reinvestment. I was working on children of incarcerated parents, gender-neutral bathrooms, allowing co-ops to raise money from outside investors, ban on fracking, having more bike racks in government buildings, affordable housing, looking at the single-payer bill. So the autism was just one of many bills. So when I saw someone from the autism team, I'm like, oh, that's a reminder for me. I got to keep working on that. I need to talk to so-and-so who's on the House Healthcare Committee. Oh, somebody else who's opposed to the bill gave me this information. I need to tell Anne or I need to tell Claudia, how do I contradict that, or are they right, and are we sunk? And so it's really important to have that presence. What not to do when you're advocating for a bill? Screaming is a really bad thing. And yet, a lot of people don't get that. I've had constituents and other people who aren't even my constituents, yelling at me that, how come you're not supporting this? And I'm busy. I don't want to, if I have to choose who I'm going to deal with, I don't want to deal with the very, very unpleasant screaming person. But I have disciplined myself, and I tend not to scream back. So I'm very proud of that. I wish I could do the same with my 6-year-old son, but it's a work in progress. Be polite, be persistent to the point of nagging. Nobody likes someone who nags, but nagging's very effective. So be there, be present, be helpful. But if you're saying to someone, you need to sign this bill, you need to vote for my bill, you need to do this, it just ain't going to happen, at least not with me. So you have a limited time and energy, but you're concerned about a particular issue. What do? I would say, one, you can always sit down and meet with your legislator. But I would say, think about who else shares your concern. Team up with them. If you have a concern about something, chances are you're not the first person with that concern. You want more people behind you so that if I'm talking to you as a legislator, I recognize, oh, you actually represent a lot of people, and this is a very serious issue. And if I take a dislike to you, or I can write you off as, that person is just a nutball. It's harder to do when you say, well, actually, there's 5 other people that have the same concern. Like, really? Okay. And not that I'm going to write you off as a nutball, which is a wholly offensive term, but and I don't even enjoy. No, I'm not even going to make a joke. Okay. So that's how you're going to have a big impact. What are the most effective way to talk with legislators and agencies? Having information. Information is power. So if you have done research, excuse me, if you have a study that you presented, if you can tell me, well, actually 7 other states already have this law in place, we're not going to be the first. That can be compelling. Whatever evidence you have is going to be helpful. And okay, this is a picture of, Claudia put the slide presentation together. I didn't. This is a picture of me hugging Representative Bill Lippert after the gay marriage law was passed, something we both worked very hard on. And Bill actually had conducted and married myself and my husband. And so that was a very emotional day. We are grateful for your support. What other efforts are you most proud of? There have been, and this bill, the marriage equality, was one of my big ones. The autism bill was very meaningful to me as well, as was some of the mundane stuff, like having a law to allow small shops to say, you know what, if you're going to give a credit card, we're going to put a $5 limit, or $10 minimum rather, or $5 minimum, and that really protects some of the small firms against the big guys. But most every idea, whether it was having more bike racks, doing the farm to plate bill, which I was the lead sponsor of, raising the minimum wage, most every idea that came that I worked on didn't come from me. It came from the experts. That's you. That's people in your community. Or it's farmers, or it's business people, or it's these special interests. And when we say special, it just means targeted. It's not a bad word. People who deeply care about something, who've already done something. My job as legislator is I'm your paid lobbyist. I am the person whose job it is to understand how to get laws made. So if you view your job as being the content expert and knowing everything about autism or everything about children whose parents are incarcerated, if you can come to me and say, hey, Jason, this is why we need a new roadway in Rutland, and I've already figured out the cost, I've already figured out the environmental impact, I've already figured out the towns that this is going through, and their select boards already approved this. I've done this homework. Can you help me pass this in the legislature? And then we have a good team. So I can't do anything without you. And I urge you, if you have an interest in this, talk to Claudia, talk to me, give us a call, and let us know how we can help you steer legislation. Because I believe that the role of government is to create a stronger community. I believe we're all a part of the community. And that's what keeps me going. And I hope it works for you. Thank you. This has been a great webinar, and I want to thank Vermont Family Network for sponsoring it. And have a good day.
All right. Thank you so much, Jason and Claudia. Everyone, don't forget about the survey, and I will email participants. If you would like a certificate, you can just reply back to me and I can get you one. So thanks again.